All right, in many of Nairobi's informal settlements, getting an education isn't just about going to the school in itself. It's about what kind of infrastructure are you finding there. Young people often are facing overcrowded classrooms, limited academic support, but also do they get the quality of education that they need? As a result of this, many adolescents struggle with basic literacy, numeracy, and also end up dropping out because completing secondary school can be something they miss out on. In response to these challenges, a team of researchers launched a program in two of Nairobi's largest informal settlements. One is called Korogocho and the other one is Viwandani. Over 9 years, the program provided academic support, mentorship, and this is an important one, digital skills training and leadership development to children between the ages of 12 to 19 years old. We speak to one of the researchers behind this program, Dr Benta Abuya, a research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. Dr. Benta, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Well, you are much welcome. Let's talk a little bit about this support program. How was it identified and what was behind the concept?
So this program, we are calling it Advancing Learning Outcomes and Transformational Change. And we sought out to sort of think about the adolescents and the girls and boys in the urban slums of Nairobi. Maybe the word slum is not the right one. Sometimes I, as a researcher, becoming very sensitive about that. I like to prefer urban informal settlements.
Sure.
So about quite a number of years ago, when we were doing research on inequalities in terms of schooling within the urban informal settlements, we realized that there was a difference in terms of access to school for children going to school within the urban informal settlements and those who are not within the urban informal settlements. So you'd find access was slightly higher, and transition to secondary school was also lower among children that were in the urban informal settlements. So speaking with the different education stakeholders within the urban informal settlements, we thought about what kind of support programs, after school support programs that we could implement to be able to ensure that children within these informal settlements accessed school, but also made a transition to secondary school. So when we started off in 2013, we started off with girls only because we realized that we also saw differences between girls and boys. Girls were being left behind even as they access schools, and they were also not making a transition. A vast majority of them were not making transition to secondary school. So when we started in 2013 to 2015, we worked on girls, and we intervened in several ways between 2013 and 2015. What we were doing, we were providing after-school support in literacy and numeracy. We were also having mentors who were also providing sessions on life skills. But we were also working with the parents who, as we know, in an urban informal settlements, most of the times the parents are busy. They might be going out to look for work in the different sectors to keep the children in school, but also just to keep the households going. And so there was very little time the parents spent with the children. So the parental component was to support parents to be able to realize that it is important to support children, but also it is important to actually know that the children even went to school or that they did their homework that they were given. And then lastly, we had a component that we called a transition subsidy, that is giving a certain amount of money, and this was capped on that time, the current amount of about perhaps 10,000 Kenyan shillings to support these parents with ensuring that the children made a transition to secondary school. That was phase one. Now, phase two, 2016 to 2019. With the successes we saw in phase one, that is, we saw increased transition, but we also saw increased access to school, and we also saw that girls were now beginning to, pick up the pieces, and parents were also beginning to support the children. But a problem still remained when we got to 2016, when the first phase ended, and that problem was we were not having the boys in the program at that time. And so we had conversations again with the education stakeholders in the urban informal settlements. And one of the things that we were concerned about coming from the stakeholders was the violence and the likelihood that boys would die before age 25 if they were not going to school. And what were we supposed to do? It was to now tell us that, yes, the girls might be making progress, but what about the boys? Now, secondly, in around that time in 2016, there was also the global change in terms of global education stakeholders, but also even regionally talking about how best do you program for girls so that you don't also leave the boys behind. Now, we were persuaded with these narratives because we also saw that sometimes those disadvantages that accrue to girls are as a result of their peers who are boys. But also, if you even want parents who are fathers to support girls' education, then you need to also talk to parents who are fathers, but also talk to these boys who are future fathers of other girls who will be born in those societies. So we were persuaded to include the boys in phase 2 in 2016 rather. But at the same time, we had made a lot of strides with the life skills in 2013, 2015. But we also saw that these children in our urban informal settlements, from the literature, but also from talking to education stakeholders, they didn't have role models, people they could look up to. And so we introduced...
Let me stop you there just a little bit because, I want us to get into some of these topics. As you're speaking now about the role models in particular, we're speaking about access to the education. And one might think that the access itself between, the urban formal settlement living kids and those who live in the urban rural settlements is just about getting into the school. But what happens behind the scenes, meaning after school, in the house, in the community, plays a huge impact on the education itself. So tell us, how does that role model impact the education itself?
So when you talk about the role model, and you're right, what happens in the household, in the community, plays a very big part when you are educating a child. Research shows that access to school and retention in school and even school completion is also affected by household factors, by parental education, by community factors, of course, over and above the fact that the child will get some will learn in class. And of course, there are teacher factors as well. And so the leadership component here was the need, together with the life skills, was the need to actually develop a holistic child so that in addition to this child the knowledge in the classroom by the teacher, the child is supposed to have values. So life skills brings values like accountability, values like self-awareness and, self-respect and being able to live with people. But the leadership aspects of it is such that the child is able to identify with specific leaders in the community and be able to model the way towards their adulthood. And so for us, when you look at the 21st century skills, the socio-emotional learning, it speaks to the reasons why we should develop a holistic child over and above getting that learning in school. And that is one of the reasons why that leadership component was very important.
Dr. Benta, we need to take a bit of a break. I love that you are speaking about that part, and we'll get into the intricacies of the program in itself after the break. Stay there on the line with us. We're speaking to Dr. Benta Abuya, research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. How do you navigate some of the challenges in informal settlements when it comes to access to education? That's our topic today. Stay with us as we continue after the break.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126.
I can see my whole world changing.
And contribute to the conversation. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
We're taking a look at this inspiring project, making sure that young people in, urban, rural settlements are able to get access to school as many other who are from higher income areas. Dr. Benta Abuya, who's a research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center, also one of the researchers of this inspiring program called the Advancing Learning Outcomes and Transformational Change Program. Thank you for staying with us, Dr. Abuya. Now let's speak a little bit about the program itself and how it has been broken down. One would think because it's a school program, it would be an interactive program only within the schooling system. But when you guys were researching what exactly the barriers to education were for these children from urban, rural settlements, what did you guys discover and how did you plan out the program, especially outside of the schooling environment?
So thank you. Thereafter, the Advancing Learning Outcomes and Transformational Change was actually implemented within the community setting. Our interest was to support what the school was already doing because we know teachers are already teaching in the classrooms and teachers get children from across the spectrum, some from the urban informal settlement, but some from the non-urban informal settlements. Now for us, and talking to the communities of Korogocho and Viwandani, us was to actually situate this program within the community and use community resources to be able to support this after-school support program. Now, I've mentioned the 5 components that we provided in phase 1. Mm-hmm. In phase 2, I've also mentioned we added the boys to the program because of the changing narratives, and then we brought in the leadership component. Now, the leadership component and the life skills component were presented to the young people through the mentors. Now, mentors that we used in the program were young people who were living in the urban informal settlements, but who had succeeded in their schooling, and most of them were college bound. The reason why we used these mentors and young people is because it was easier for the mentors to actually get attached to the young people and to be able, the young people to identify with them because they lived and succeeded in the same settings. Now, for the parental component, we used the guidance and counselors. They are counselors that are actually attached to these communities through the government. So there are counselors within these communities, and we use the counselors to actually train using manuals that we co-developed with the education stakeholders to talk to the parents about ways in which they can collaborate with their children to enable the children to stay in school. So some of the things that parents could be taken through is even how do you speak to your child? How do you motivate your child? How do you as a parent become a parent who can really articulate what is called positive parenting? that it's not always the cane that works, but you can actually speak to your child, agree on certain issues, and be able to get this child to go to school, but to also get this child to focus on the school.
Doctor, how do these things work hand in hand? Because it seems like it's a multi-layered approach that you are dealing with here. It's not just what's happening in the school, but it's also what's happening in terms of the resources at the school, but also you have that parental and leadership component. How do these things work in sync with one another?
So the way they work in sync with one another is we also brought in an innovative aspect of it. You see, the teachers are teaching in schools, the mentors are in the community. So we brought the mentors and the teachers together in what we call the teacher-mentor forums. Now, the mentors would identify those issues that children were struggling with when they came to the after-school support sessions. And in the mentor-teacher forums, the mentors would actually articulate these issues to the teachers. Then the teachers would pick them up within the classrooms and vice versa. And in most cases, we learned from the teacher-mentor forums that it was very helpful because teachers were even now able to identify the children who perhaps were struggling and reasons why they were struggling. And the mentors, being that they were part of the community, they were able to reach out to the parents of the children to be able to speak to them about some of these academic struggles and how to better support their children in literacy and in numeracy.
Well, it sounds like this was quite successful, even in the short space of time that you were able to implement this program. Are there new phases that you're looking to have as you continue with a program like this, especially because these environments still exist? There are more children who obviously need this kind of attention and this kind of help.
Yes, so I must mention that before we ended the session and in phase 3 that we started in 2019 and ended it in 2022, of course, our report came out in 2023, is that we actually followed a cohort. Just before I get to your other question, we followed the last cohort that were in primary school, that were in the second phase, into secondary school, because we wanted to also see the feasibility of this program in secondary school, but we also wanted to see how sustainable an intervention of this kind would be for older adolescents. It would be interesting to note that actually the program intervention tenets were sustained to year 4. For those that we followed since 2016, by the time they were in 2019, we were seeing very increased performance in numeracy and literacy amongst the groups that were being followed up. But we also identified from the last follow-up that when you now want to program for older adolescents in secondary school, you may want to adapt certain aspects of an intervention like this, because remember, older adolescents now go to secondary school, they are staying far away from their parents, and therefore that parental control begins to cease or to wane.
Well,
but then back to your question, that are we thinking? Yes, we are thinking, and this program has been part of aspects that we have been able to speak about to various education stakeholders, including Kenya, Uganda, and we are hoping that discussing it with the different countries, we should be able to, with support from our partners, be able to take it to other countries. But one other thing we really want to do is we want to also test this program with the support from our partners in a rural setup, so that we can be able to say that this program works in the urban informal settlements like we have already established, but that it can also work in specific ways in a rural setting.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, Dr. Benta. Really, really interesting stuff. And I think quite a success indeed, especially because, you know, when children get education here on the African continent, that's a success greater than just those kids themselves. But it's a success for the community, it's a success for the country and the continent at large. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you very much. I look forward to getting the link to the section. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Benta Abuya, research scientist at the African Population Health and Research Center. It's 9:31 Central Africa time. Let's get our latest sports news.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.